In this case, it's dealing with the research perspective. We are very pleased to have this panel with us here as they look at some of the problems we've been defining. There's obviously early solutions that are seen in the research base and refinement to that research that's seen, frankly, by conversations as we've seen at CERTs. So we are very pleased and happy to have the R part of search research represented by this panel, taking a look at things that they see from their vantage point as cyber solutions, cyber training, frankly, accomplishment of the cyber mission is done. They are all have a variety of qualifications and, dare I say, certifications. I've heard that word a couple times, and no doubt a number of degrees. We do have with us, as the moderator, Dr. Bruce Caulkins, Research Assistant Professor and Director of the Modeling and Simulation of Behavior Cybersecurity Program at the University of Central Florida's Institute for Simulation and Training. I will tell you that in early conversations as we were putting this conference together, we were fortunate to talk to Bruce. And Bruce had a remarkable set of perspectives about the problem of cyber education and cyber training. And from his role and work with PEO STRI and the Central Florida Institute, he had some pretty good perspectives on who needed to be here, what subjects we needed to talk about. And we said, by golly, you defined it so well, you're going to moderate a panel. And he about jumped off the phone, as I recall. But it was indeed a very early thinker and helper as we put this event together. Very pleased to have him with us today as he talks about this research perspective on cyber security, cyber training, and cyber education with a panel that's with him. He's an Army officer retired after 28 years of experience, Chief of Cyber Strategy, Plans, Policy, and Exercise Divisions at Pacific Command, so he's got operational experience. He's seen it from the COCOM. He's seen it in the Army, across his career, and now in academia. So I would like to offer, please, your applause as we welcome the panel to the stage.
Thanks, sir. Hello? We good? Okay. Well, thanks, sir. It just goes to show, even after 28 years, you still don't learn to not volunteer for things. So it's, retired generals tell you to do something, hey, you're still doing it. So, sir, thank you very much. I want to thank FCA International, also the local FCA volunteers for putting on such a great show. I had an opportunity to talk to General Morrison a few hours ago before he left, and I told him, I said, and I shared this with General Wood, if I have to, if I don't want to, but if I have to choose between coming back to TechNet or coming back here, I'm coming back here next year. Because I thought this was the exact right type of environment, with the right number of people to do the right things at the right time. Because one of the things, some of you know this, others probably don't, part of my bio is I spent a lot of time in Fort Gordon. And I loved every minute of it. There was a lot of pain, though, because when you're in a TRADOC environment, it is painful. But when General Wood and Mike Warlick and others, were talking about setting up this conference, I felt really passionate about it. Because I know what the power of Fort Gordon, brings to the table for the Army, but also for the Joint Force, because I saw it in Hawaii. And I saw the initial beginnings of what was going on both within Cyber Command and NSA and also out in the field, so to speak. So I felt really passionate about it. I wanted to be a part of it somehow, and also really talk about setting up this panel and explain from academia perspective, but also government, how research, both within whether it's peer research or peer-reviewed research or research to help with education and training, how that can really improve things both within the Army and DoD as a whole. So what I'd like to do is I'll talk for the next 3 hours. Then each one's got an hour piece here, and then we'll be out of here about 10 o'clock or so. So General would be all mad at me. Now I'm gonna talk for a couple minutes. I've got a few points I want to discuss. Then I'll introduce the panel members and let them talk for a few minutes as well. Probably the first point is when you look at education and training, they're not synonymous. It ain't the same thing. okay? When you train somebody, you're training them to do a function. You train somebody how to fire a rifle. And when you're educating somebody, it's a different ballgame. You know, you really want to figure out, do we need to train a cyber person, depending on their level of expertise, what their jobs are, and you know, what rank are, or do we need to educate them? You may have to do both, but you have to figure out the right time and place for that. You know, maybe at AIT, you're gonna do one level of training, and then as they go higher up, maybe later in life, they get education. So you have to really understand that, because education gets at the theory behind things. You know, why do routers behave the way they do? What does a firewall really give you, other than, you know to turn this on and turn this off and make sure you do X, Y, and Z. Okay, the X, Y, and Z part is fine, because you need that, but you still have to know what's going on under the hood. You know, why does an operating system work the way it does? Why does every time Microsoft puts out, you know, some type of update, something else goes wrong? So you have to understand really what's going on with this, especially with the software updates and also the hardware. So that's key. So the part that we do, at least in academia and also in industry, is research feeds into this. You know, we can use, like at UCF, we have graduate courses and undergraduate courses that are either computer science heavy or computer security, or in my case, behavioral cyber or forensic cyber or forensics, digital forensics, for example. And the research that we do in conjunction with the training feeds into the education. And then a lot of times the education will feed into the research, because all of a sudden you have these grad students that are, you know, see the light, so to speak, and then they want to do more research on the outside for their thesis or their dissertation. So it's this continuous circle between the research that we have and the education. You also need to continue to think out of the box. Everything General Morrison said today about what we're doing and Fort Gordon's doing in cyber education is awesome. Because, you know, as the former LSIT commandant here and SIT director, I know firsthand what TRADOC can and can't do. One thing it doesn't do very well is when General Morrison says, hey, I want this training next in a couple months, TRADOC, the system does this, shakes its head. But the officers, you know, the captains and lieutenants and the NCOs and everybody else and the civilians have to figure it out, because they don't have a choice. They have a two-star saying go left, and they're gonna go hard left. So that's what you have to do. You have to continue to think out of the box, continue how to meet the commander's needs here at TRADOC, while also figuring out how can we train towards the critical tasks that exist within these MOSs, especially the new ones. And finally, the collaborations are key. You know, as a SIT director, we had this wall we called the NASCAR wall. It was a list of all the companies, and I won't point them out, but there are a lot of them are represented here today, and you can imagine which ones. But we had all the companies' logos on this wall that showed who we were collaborating with and why. And it was more than a couple. Because we found out that when you collaborate tightly with industry and also academia, because we had a co-op agreement with Syracuse University for our 24 course, but when you have these tight agreements, then they can help you with the research in the education, because they're keeping their curriculum up and they're pushing their products in the case, whether it's hardware or software. And it was good for us because we were already using their products. We weren't, you know, it wasn't anything, certainly nothing wrong with that, but the Army was already using these products. So we have these relationships, these collaboration relationships that really paid off. And I know you guys are still doing that, so hopefully that'll keep feeding into that. And I do have one more point, but finally, as far as academia, and I'm sure with industry, I'm asking the military folks here, we need your help. You know, if you guys, you know, we have an MOU with Fort Gordon, and there are several other institutions here that also have MOUs, academic MOUs. You know, tell us what you need. Do you need us to do co-op agreements? Do you need us to provide some kind of training? Do you need us to do online thing? And we're having these discussions with Ed Buckner and his folks. So, but feed that to him and to others to get back to us. And also even through the Battle Lab. Does the Battle Lab need research, you know, assistance with their experimentation? So these are the type of questions that, that we have that hopefully the military can help us as we move forward towards these collaborations that we have and that we're going to keep needing to push things forward. So what I'd like to do is introduce the rest of the panel here real quickly. And then I'll start off with Liz at the end after I introduce everybody. We do have an outstanding panel today, and thanks for coming. Liz Bledsoe to my right, she's the Director of Cyber Resiliency and Training at STRI. They're about to become a PDM here pretty soon, a product manager. So we're pretty excited about that. It's STRI in Orlando. She retired from the Army as a Signal Lieutenant Colonel in 2012. Her assignments included 11th Signal, 7th Signal Brigade, DITRA, and a few others as she moved into the acquisition realm. Her current job at STRI includes the persistent cyber training environment and Blue Team standards and certification programs. So thank you, Liz, for being here.
My pleasure.
Next we have Jeff Gottschalk. He is the leader of the Cyber Systems and Ops Group at MIT Lincoln Labs. In this capacity, he is responsible for understanding key operational challenges, developing and leading R&D efforts in support of national cyber missions, including C&D, attack, and exploitations. So thank you, Jeff, for being here. Next up is Scott Lathrop. Scott is the Director of Cyber and Secure Autonomy at SOAR Technology Incorporated. In this capacity, he is focused on leading a team that is investigating the intersection of artificial intelligence and cyber to support human-machine teaming for cyber and EW ops. He retired as a colonel in the Army, culminated as a Director of Advanced Capability and Technology at U.S. Cyber Command. Thank you, Scott. And finally, my hero for the day, Ed Sobiesky. He was the late addition, so don't read the nameplate. But he also is a retired 06 and the chief of the Education and Force Support Division at ACI at West Point. He's also a professor of computer science, and we are very glad you're here, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like to turn it over real quickly. Everybody's going to talk for a couple minutes, 5 minutes. We have some questions. If you have questions, please email them so we can read them. The voice of God, or if they're still over there, can read them. But like I said, everybody's going to get a few, 5 minutes or so to talk, and we'll move on from there. So first up is Liz.
Thank you, Bruce. It's my honor being here today, and I appreciate being asked. I'm the product manager for Persistent Cyber Training Environment with the mission of providing a joint standardized, operationally relevant training system for the cyber mission forces across DoD. This is a unique program for acquisition community, as deliberate acquisition is usually very dogmatic, bureaucratic process. We'll deliver a tank in 10 years with 20-year-old technology. And now we're in the realm where we have to be equal and stay relevant with current technology in order to make sure that our cyber mission forces have the ability to do their jobs in real-world missions. Fortunately, the problem is not unique to DoD. For example, banking systems, banking industry has similar problems, and they have the benefit of being able to throw money at the problem. We become the fortunate beneficiaries of their research. So everything we've seen so far as market research is what we're looking for to build this training system is already in the market. So we don't feel the need to develop anything, which we probably wouldn't do well anyway. That's not our forte as the government, as the acquisition process. But to look at what capabilities are in the field and pull the best of breed and integrate them into a cohesive training system. So the challenge lies in not only the integration of that piece, but to maintain the operational relevancy of the system with the changing technology, the changing threat, and then the evolving TTPs. We're utilizing unique contracting vehicles in order to do competitive prototyping like other transaction authorities. This allows us to be more interactive with industry instead of the normal contract process where it's more like a tennis game. We throw something over the fence, the contractor throws it back, and a year to 18 months later we have a contract and can actually talk to them. So this allows us to do more innovative approach to the development and the integration of the PCTE capability. Now, this approach comes with some dangers because we're going to provide capability to the field very quickly and then iteratively build upon that. And what I mean by the danger is because our first iterations will probably not be great. That's what happens when you're doing it this way as opposed to the 10-year plan where you continue to test it over and over again until it's absolutely perfect. I don't think there's any need to wait for the golden system, not when the capability is so badly needed. With anything in the field right now, that would be beneficial. So what we do is we'll continue to prototype the efforts and go in a cycle of doing the market research, procuring the capabilities, integrated into the system. Then the next iteration improves the capability, adds more capability, and we continue on until all the gaps are filled. So the current status of PCTE changes probably by the minute, but this is what it was a few minutes ago. We're in the process of procuring regional compute and storage to the big locations for cyber mission forces. This provides the ability to provide, well, this is where PCTE will be hosted, but it also allows to build environments and actually conduct training on those systems, and they're pretty hefty. Is of what we're providing. We also finished our first what we call Cyber Innovation Challenge using other transaction authorities, and we're procuring capabilities for the first prototype effort. And in the evaluation, that was the final demonstration of that Cyber Innovation Challenge, we used 12 Cyber Mission Force operators across the services. So this isn't me and my team doing this in a vacuum. I want it to be very user interactive and be able to get their input as soon as possible so I'm not wasting my time developing something that is not useful for them, something I got picked up from SoftWorks and SOCOM. And then on 1 February, we're doing an industry day to kick off Cyber Innovation #2, which was announced last week, I believe. For the next capability that will come out in the second iteration of PCTE. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Next, we have Jeff Gottschalk.
Great.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me. So I'll give you a little bit of background about me and my group at Lincoln Laboratory. Since I'm an R&D technology kind of person, I'll offer you 2 hypotheses, which I believe to be true, but of course, in the time allotted for my comments, I can't prove that they're true. So I'll offer you a couple of data points that I think are highly correlated with those hypotheses, and then you can draw your own conclusions and maybe ask some more questions. You know, in the work that I do, I lead a team of 60, technologists, researchers. It's pretty exciting. A big part of what we're trying to do is understand the operational gaps and needs of the military cyber operational forces, and that includes not just the technology gaps and needs, but how they use technology to do their jobs. And so that sometimes gets into what should their jobs be and how should they be doing things. It's kind of interesting. As far as the people that I have on my team, obviously education is really important, both in terms of selecting those people. We're really trying to select high quality technology people. And that means, understanding their backgrounds. We've got, out of those 60 people, about 20% are bachelor's level. The rest is an even split between master's and Ph.D. But even degrees is not enough to actually be able to select somebody for excellence. There's a lot of discussion in the last panel about critical thinking. Basically, I think a good way to help select on that is, can you ask actually a person about something they've done that's really hard? And can they answer easy questions in such a way that they've answered them easily? And then can you ask them sort of strange questions? And can they think on their feet and reason about that, even if there isn't an answer per se? The ability to do that over and over again is a pretty good selector. And it turns out that you can do that across any educational background. It's really kind of a driver of the person. And obviously their education experience and their work experience enhances that. Training is also important, and I guess I'll note that even though we take a lot of people with a degree, they are not necessarily an expert at cybersecurity. In many cases, they haven't done any cybersecurity. Some people are physicists like me. So having training is important. Coursework is important, both external through various companies and so forth that we utilize, and then internal training is important. But perhaps the biggest element of success at getting people trained up to do things well and have expertise is that hands-on experience piece. And so we have a number of different environments and laboratories that we allow people to be able to interact on our team with things and try things out. And so I find that really successful people spend a lot of their own personal time experimenting in those safe environments, because in some cases it's hard to do things safely at home, and in some cases we just have the resources to be able to do that. So if you have an opportunity to allow people to tinker and give them time to do that and the resources to do that, I think it'll pay off and result in better folks. Okay, so the hypotheses. Researchers, I think, really need to understand the operational environment and context and the problems. That means they need to interact with people to be able to do that. And it turns out that most researchers actually like doing it, even if they're not sure about how to do it first and think it's a little strange. And it pays huge dividends. The other hypothesis is that there's a really tight and interesting relationship between gaps, technology, TTPs, right, techniques, procedures, and training. And there's a feedback loop or a cycle that goes between a variety of those different things. So as you're maturing identifying new gaps, you're developing technology to address those gaps, you're in some cases adjusting or changing TTPs. In some cases, you're fitting within those TTPs. That therefore influences training and so forth as it goes back. And we've seen actually several iterations of that happening in several of our projects. Okay, so here's some data points, hopefully that support that. We have cases where it's been very successful embedding our researchers with operational communities in several different areas, both internally and the cyber security components of Lincoln Laboratory, and with government organizations and sponsors. One of those we actually have here at Fort Gordon in the CPB for the last 3 months, and we'll be down here for several more. But that also goes both ways. We've had very successful training with industry and other similar type apprenticeships or internships or whatever you want to call them, where we've had people from the military come and spend time with us, and one of their biggest benefits is their ability to have exposure to a wide range of technical problems and the ability and access to those sort of hands-on tinkering environments. We're proud to say that we've had cases of Army folks come through. They were not branch 17. They had some computer IT background. After a year with us, we're able to make a really great initial transition into branch 17 and credited some of their strength, hit the ground running to some of that exposure. In terms of the workflows and the TTPs, there was a lot of talk about gunnery tables. We've actually had cases where we've used the gunnery tables and other doctrine to inform studies on gaps and needs for technology, and then how, sort of what the recipes or the cookbooks should be for how to utilize that technology to help best satisfy those gunnery tables. And in some cases, those processes are useful, I think, for training scenarios, and we've also had some successes where that work is actually fed back to adjusting some of the state of the gunnery tables. There's a lot of talk about core and below. We've done a lot of work with the Marines, and in this particular case, the technology we had built, we're building, we needed to have a test environment, a test bed. We built this test bed. And it turned out that folks in the Marines saw that and said, we could, if you adapted this slightly, we could really use this at sort of platoon level training, where the folks deployed could actually utilize this to do mission rehearsal. And so we very quickly were able to do that, and that's been very successful. It's basically a live virtual constructed environment that's portable and includes both cyber and RF radio frequency components, and that's actually led now to the Marine Corps working to set up a new program of record to start next fiscal year based on some of the lessons learned from that. Also proud to say that in some cases, the teams that were utilizing this were able to actually enhance their training. They were able to complete their training quickly, more quickly than normal, and get through a lot of their objectives. So those are just a couple of data points.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Next up is Scott Lathrop.
All right, well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here in balmy Augusta. I think it's 30 degrees warmer here than it is in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Yeah.
So I definitely appreciate the invite. It's just been a pleasure over the last 2 days to reconnect with old colleagues and the professionals that you are. I'm so proud just to see the growth and what's happened over the last 2 years since I've been away from the cyber mission force and CyberCom, just to see how much progress has been made. It makes you feel good inside. So thank you for the invitation. My comments today are really directed on some of the work that we're doing at STRI Technology. Just for your background, STRI Technology is an artificial intelligence company that was spun off the University of Michigan 20 years ago. So we've been conducting artificial intelligence research for the Department of Defense for a long time now, well before AI was a buzzword as it is today. From my perspective, I'm really interested in how we can apply artificial intelligence techniques to help make cybersecurity products and help to enable the humans that are using those products more effective. And so when I went to my human resource person when I first joined the company and said I want to find experts in AI and experts in cyber, two of the hottest technologies right now, they just laughed at me. And so to echo some of the comments that were made earlier in previous panels, you really don't, what you want to find are those people who can think outside the box, who have some of the aptitude that you need, but they don't need to have everything. And then bring them into your environment and immerse them in the environment and help them grow. And that's really where I think the comments that were made by the other two panelists here are really important, that we bring together the researchers who are conducting the research, the developers that have to productize the solutions, and the operators that are going to employ those solutions, because that's where a lot of the learning takes place, and the researchers really appreciate that perspective because it makes their research real. From a big picture at my company, the things that I'm working on is really two aspects. How do we make cyber systems more autonomous? And then how do we make autonomous systems more trustworthy? So to get to your comment that's been iterated a couple times throughout the conference, we not only want to build the robots, we want to make sure the robots are trustworthy. And so if you can break into my system, I'm going to detect and characterize that and try to come back at you.
Or the AI might turn against you someday.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when part of our company works with the commercial automobile industry in Michigan and with the driver's technology, and their goal there is to remove the driver from the car. I mean, that's what they're ultimately trying to get at. But then when we start talking about, well, what are you going to do from a cybersecurity perspective to protect that car? They start talking about adding all these products to the car, and I said, well, so you're going to remove the driver, but then you're going to add a cybersecurity analyst to the car to monitor the cybersecurity status of the car. That's not going to work. So we have to build products that are a little more intelligent and that can acquire the data that's within the system, whether it be a car or an IT network, and be able to make sense of it and keep humans in the loop where the humans need to be in the loop. And so that's kind of the perspective I bring. For the purposes of this research panel, where we're focused on education and training, I really have two kind of key points. One is, how do we create immersive training environments? And so a lot of this comes from the work that we started at West Point back in the early 2000s, where we started work with the cyber defense exercise, where we had each of the academies defending their networks and the National Security Agency's Red Team attacking those networks. And what we learned from those experiences, and what we have learned over the past 17, 18 years now that we've been doing that, is that really makes concrete the educational aspects that they're learning, the theoretical aspects they're learning. It makes it concrete to the individuals who are going through that training. And so I think creating those immersive environments are important, but I think from a DoD perspective, and probably from an industry perspective too, most of our focus in creating those immersive environments have been on the actual terrain, the range itself. And there's been less focus on other aspects that need to happen for a training environment, the content that you need to generate in order to support the scenario development, the white cell type work that you need to have to evaluate and assess the progress of the trainees or the folks going through the environment. And then you always need an adversary or an opponent in these types of events if you want to make them realistic. And so some of the things that we're looking at from a research perspective is how do we automate or how do we create some autonomous systems that can address some of those issues. And so one of the projects that we have going on right now is looking at how to create autonomous cognitive agents to perform things like red teaming. So we can plop these agents in the network and they can perform the function of a red team so that you don't have to bring so many people to your training events. Or you can conduct individual training at a level where you have an actual thinking adversary that's executing the TTPs of the type of adversary that you might be going up against. And so that's one aspect of it. And then the other aspect of it is how do we close the 1.8 million workforce gap? And I'll argue that we're not going to close the 1.8 million workforce gap. I go back to my example with the automobile industry. We are continuing to move in a direction as a society where we expect more and more functionality performance from our computational systems. We expect driverless cars. We expect systems to do things for us. We don't expect to add more people to that to help solve those problems from a cybersecurity perspective. If you look at your home networks, how many of you in your home networks are running a SOC? I know I'm not. I mean, how many times do you analyze your logs that are coming in on your routers and you have a SIM solution running? We don't. And so we expect our cybersecurity products to be more intelligent, and we have to start working towards that. We are not going to close the workforce gap. I think everything we're doing here is important to try to close that gap, but we've got to make our systems more intelligent. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. And last and certainly not least, Ed Sobieski.
Good afternoon. Dan Bennett sends his regrets for not getting here. It was for not because he didn't try, and I'm honored to be here with the other panelists. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to discuss the concept of research from the Army Cyber Institute's perspective. I would say that concur with much of what has been said and would add that we take a very holistic viewpoint. It's not a competition between education or training or research. There's an absolute intersection in, synthesis and, synergy that occurs between them. And I would say that from the holistic standpoint, we also are very much advocating for a multidisciplinary viewpoint. We absolutely up at the ACI do technical research and technical training, but technical research, but we're also doing research in legal and ethical issues, such as vulnerability disclosure equities, and policies, such as being a part of some key national groups and deterrence, and being a part of the cyber operational community and the work that's taking place with EW and information operations and how that's all coming together with even intelligence systems. We're involved in the human resources aspect of research, and we have some cognitive science that are getting into all the cognitive aspects involved with cyber. And we're definitely very interested in the emerging technology issues, including things like quantum computing or the post-DARPA Cyber Grand Challenge world and the implications that the DARPA Cyber Grand Challenge results bring about. And finally, we also then are very much into making sure that we look at integrating cyber beyond just having it be a technical component of the curriculum. Using West Point as a model, we have attempted to integrate cyber throughout the general education curriculum and then lending itself also to pockets of interdisciplinary electives, threads, a cyber minor that's very multidisciplinary, and then several majors that have cyber components to them. And then I think one of the secret sauces of West Point is having an extracurricular aspect that balances that with something like we have 3 cyber clubs, including one that is a world champion cyber policy team, a competitive cyber team that you have to try out for, and if you get on it, you get exempted from some duties, and every couple of weekends you go and you compete at capture the flag competitions like one of the varsity sports and things like that. And then a cyber club for the masses to take people who just would like to learn about cyber but really aren't there yet, to have kind of like our farm team, and build up and stuff like that. In addition to all that, we view it as a key component to provide key scholarly venues. And we've made a lot of headway in gaining great credibility for a cyber journal, the Cyber Defense Review that we have stood up. I think we've completed 6 issues now. I would invite everybody in this room to consider publishing there. This is a multidisciplinary journal that is really gaining some traction nationally, and it is meant for exactly this type of community to talk to the rest of the community in a scholarly manner. We also have a international conference on cyber conflict that we are doing in conjunction with the NATO Cyber Defense Center of Excellence, and that takes place in Washington, D.C. in November. It's meant to totally complement wonderful events such as this. And so we also try and do things like, as part of our research, prevent strategic surprise by doing things like looking 10 years out at threat casting. And then finally, we think a critical part of cyber education research is maximizing the ways to communicate to the entire cyber education, cyber development community what is working best. For us, we have something that we call the Cyber Leader Development Program that is a pre-commissioning program that the director of the ACI runs for the Army that integrates up to 800 hours of outside-the-class structured activities into a coherent multi-year experience to complement a cyber major or a cyber-related minor. And then if you successfully complete it, you actually get an additional skill identifier. If you don't necessarily complete it, you still get all the benefit of knowing a lot more about cyber. And we are trying very hard to continue to collaborate with peer institutions in writing about these things and in continuing initiatives. We are partnering with people like the ABET Accreditation Organization to develop cybersecurity accreditation guidelines, with ACM and IEEE to have cyber scholarship taking place, and also making sure we're not bypassing organizations like, for instance, training organizations such as SANS, hoping to continue to work with them as well. So overall, if I was to leave you once again, very multidisciplinary viewpoint towards the research. Definitely don't want to abandon the technical foundation, but think we need to make sure we're looking holistically at the whole problem, state space.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Great comments, everyone. I also, Ed, you just reminded me about when you're talking about West Point, that at UCF we also have a hack club, and which is also good for undergrad. They won the national championships 3 years in a row from 14 to 16. And also, as everybody knows, we have the national football champions too. So undefeated and beat Auburn, who beat Alabama and Georgia. So that's kind of. I was impressed though with our
Losing their coach.
Yeah, and we lost the coach. So what are you gonna do? Nebraska was calling with a lot of money. What I'd like to do is ask a few questions. Sly, did you have any back there? Voice of God.
Yes, we do. There's several of them.
Okay, start with yours.
We will start with the first question. We're making great strides on growing our DoD IT cyber capabilities. An emerging area of cyber vulnerabilities is focused on weapon systems, also referred to as embedded IT, platform IT, and cyber physical systems. Is there training being developed to address hardening of our DoD weapon systems against cyber attacks?
So the short answer is yes. I think where this question, well, I'll tell you where I'm going to take this question. I'm going to take it in the direction of emulated environments versus simulated environments. So yes, we need to do training to protect and defend our platform systems. The challenge in doing that training, from my perspective, is that it's very, very expensive to replicate those systems in a training environment. And so I think this is something that PCTE and other efforts across DoD are going to have to address. But you can't go out and buy all this expensive equipment to replicate a platform system. And so the question is, how do you create that immersive environment without having to go buy all that equipment? And so this is where I think simulated-based approaches, where we start building cyber-physical systems in a simulation where we can take advantage of physics engines and game engines and so forth to simulate the physical effects that would occur through a cyber type system is going to be important. Because most of our efforts right now in building cyber ranges are all about building emulated environments. That is, environments that are made up of a lot of virtual devices. So I think simulation is a key here in an untapped area that we're not completely addressing right now.
I'll foot stomp your comments, and I'll answer that in a also completely different way, just taken in a completely different direction. So we got asked probably about a year ago to help a part of the Air Force that has a program, basically system engineering support for various programs. And, they're buying material that have obviously has computers and networks and stuff like that in it, even though it's not for cyber operations of any kind. And so they were dealing with all the RMF and other type things that were going on. And what they wanted was basically a cyber training class for their program managers to understand what the key issues are with cyber so that they could actually put that in perspective and understand a little bit better about the significance of RMF and what that means. So that's something that we did sort of on short notice using some internal courseware that we had. And I think it was a learning experience, let's put it that way. But I think that's another piece of it that's important when you're talking about securing material that the government is buying. Recognize that the people who are designing it, in some cases, don't have the cybersecurity or cyber operations background to understand some of the significances of what is being developed and put into the material. Likewise, the people who are building that obviously have to produce it at cost and reliability. So there's kind of an interesting intersection that I think is another active area for further progress.
And just to add to that, and also adding another twist to it, is not so much as far as training, but within the acquisition community, there's the whole shift left initiative in order to get blue teams, those that are trained, involved in the development of systems so they don't make those mistakes, and then they don't find out about it until they get into testing, and then it's a very costly thing to fix later on. So they're trying to push that back and to get those trained guys, those smart guys involved in the development of those systems.
Just my 2 cents I would add is that I really think that one of the things that's, if we're going to survive this sort of challenge, I think it's going to have to involve automated assistance and sometimes that'll involve machine learning, but other times it just might be regular good old-fashioned intelligent automated assistance. And looking out 5 to 10 years, I still believe that one of the things that's going to emerge is a concept called complex interdependence. I think the world is evolving so quickly into the Internet of Things and our critical infrastructures being vulnerable that not only are we going to worry about our critical infrastructures, I think we're going to be worried about China's critical infrastructures and Russia's critical infrastructures, because if they go down for 6 months, it collapses the world economy and causes us. So I think there's going to be this strange relationship where we're wanting to cooperate enough with our adversaries that we are keeping things stable, almost sort of a little bit of a United Game of Thrones sort of feeling.
Thanks.
Thank you. The next question is, what happens to the human workforce we are recruiting as machine-to-machine, machine learning, and artificial intelligence are better developed and integrated? Is there a point where automation pushes the workforce we are presently recruiting to the sidelines?
You want to hit that AI guy?
No. We always need people. This is my opinion, of course. I don't ever see an environment where you're going to have a machine. Yes, you're going to have at some level machines fighting machines, but there still should be people involved in the decision-making process. And so I think you're just going to see a shift of what people are doing, shifting to maybe another level if you think about tactical, operational, strategic. So shifting to another tactical level. So if you think about what like an interactive operator might do today, or on a CPT team, what a hunt analyst might do, you could see some of that being potentially automated or created autonomy, but I still think you're going to need in my opinion, you still need the analyst that's analyzing the results of those interactions. Yeah.
And I would say that in terms of taking action to accomplish tasks, that's obviously a team effort. And I think that is going to heavily involve people. So even though you can have AI augmenting members of those teams to do things, you're still going to have to require people to talk to people about making those decisions and how to collaborate.
So I'll just take a contrary point of view and say that I think that in the next 5 to 15 years, we're going to have people augmenting machines. And I think that one of the areas of study besides complex interdependence is I think there needs to be some serious study devoted to what humans truly can do better than machines, say 10 years from now. Because the cost of bringing a human in is going to be so high, there better be a significant gain to bring the human into the loop. And so maybe not 5 years, but 10, 15, 20 years before this cohort of second lieutenants maybe pins on lieutenant colonel, it's going to be a huge cost to bring a human into the loop, so it better be worth it. And I think our adversaries are thinking that way. I mean, China's vowed to dominate the world in AI by 2030. I don't think they're necessarily thinking it's going to be humans that are doing that AI.
Yeah, I mean, I think the strategy I think we want to approach it with is how do we close that 1.8 million gap with, at least in my opinion, recognizing that we're not going to be able to do it all with people. And so how do we augment the smart people that we have with automation or intelligent systems, whatever you want to call it, AI, to help increase the humans' level of productivity so that we don't need 1.8 million or whatever the upper number is.
Are you going to at least concede that someday we might be augmenting the intelligence systems with people?
Based on my research in AI, we have a long ways to go.
We'll see, we'll see.
Oh, I'm going to one-up you. I think at some point we'll have to actually be figuring out what the AI is deciding on our behalf.
Oh, yes, that I agree with. That I agree
We
with.
got a ways to go.
I guess I sat the right people next to each other. So that was good.
We got a ways to go.
Okay.
All right, thanks. The next question is, how does your organizations link with innovation within the DoD lab ecosystem and beyond DoD into the civilian hotbeds for innovation?
At UCF, we're co-located with PEO STRI, a wing of a subset of ARL is also there. So we have quite a number of agreements and contracts floating around as far as working. And a lot of what we do, at least from where I work within the Institute of Simulation Training, a lot of it has to do with the human-in-the-loop modeling simulation aspects of M&S, and in my case for behavioral cybersecurity. So we have that opportunity. We're working closely with PEO STRI on assisting them with PCT work. We have contracts through IARPA, DARPA, and others, whether it's co-located or not, or remotely. So you just, as far as academic, you try to forge relationships as you move forward in your interest areas, hopefully matching it up with, meet the requirements of the government or of DoD. And also, when we did our MOU with Fort Gordon, when I had retired and left, one of the things, and I started working at UCF, I said I want to reach back and work with Fort Gordon as best we can. You got local universities that can provide on-site service, which we wouldn't provide, but we certainly can help work with the Battle Lab Experimentation Division, or whatever they're called this week, and work with them on the research angles, trying to get some hard problems. Could be in software-defined networks, could be in other technologies to support synthetic training environment or to support cyber, in fact. And also we're looking at, how can we help with the cyber school and the signal school with the resources that we have at UCF, whether they're online or co-op degrees or just some of the advances in the technologies and the behavioral sciences that we're looking at across the board.
I was thinking earlier that PCT is kind of unique in another way because there's not a DoD problem. We have the opportunity to work with universities, with labs, and with other entities to figure out the problem and not to reinvent the wheel. So we already have a partnership with UCF. I've been approached by other universities DOT&E has an informal lab coalition with government labs, which we've been to events before to see what technologies they have. So we can really bring in what's being done out there. And the other transaction authorities makes it easier for companies that come in that don't have to have the rules normally needed or have the restrictions normally needed to contract with the government. So it could be just a fly-by-night company with one person in it, and they can do business with the government. So it's unique in that way as well.
I don't have too much to add other than everything we do is government-owned intellectual property, so we do it, and then the governments, they can do what they want with it.
Yeah, we get all our research funding is through organizations such as DARPA and the service labs and the CERDEX and TARDEX and so forth. So we're well connected with that aspect of the research community. I think where the challenges are, being now that I'm on this side of the fence, is the folks that work at those organizations don't always understand your requirements as operators. And so it's obviously important for you to keep in communication with them and make sure they understand your requirements, but it's also on us as industry to make sure that we understand, by forums such as this, understand what your requirements are also.
And I would just say that the Army Cyber Institute's mission definitely requires us to have, in general, informal but meaningful relationships with places like Picatinny and Aberdeen and DARPA, but we also are kind of tasked to be the eyes and ears for the Army when it comes to like academia and the private sector. And then in addition to that, we're very interested in continuing to devote resources to help the Cyber Center of Excellence revise and advance its curriculum and things like that. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the great questions, and thank you for your attention. Thanks, guys.
Well, again, I want to thank you for joining us, and again,